I was 3 steps from the palace gates, 18 months of hidden feelings and professional boundaries behind me, when a 7-year-old girl's desperate scream of my name shattered every wall I had built, and I turned to see Princess Kyra running toward me with tears streaming down her face, because no one had told her I was leaving. Finn froze. His hand tightened on his medical bag as he watched the little princess hurtle towards him, arms outstretched. He knew she would be devastated by his departure. It was impossible not to form a bond over 3 months of constant care through Kyra's illness. "Kyra," I called back when she was close enough that her tears made her words inaudible. She heard the note of desperation and broke into an even faster sprint, leaving guards scrambling down the palace steps behind her, unable to keep up with a child's urgency. When she reached me, Kyra threw herself at me so hard, I stumbled back a step. "Please don't leave," she sobbed into my shoulder, clutching tightly, as though trying to pull me back through time and space by sheer force of will. Her grip was surprising for such a small girl, her nails digging lightly into the fabric of my coat where they had started to tear after weeks of being dragged around in search of answers. "Kyra," I said gently, but firmly, lifting one hand from its hold on her back to cup her face and force her eyes up to meet mine. "Sweetheart, no." She cut me off loudly, shaking her head so vigorously that some tears splattered onto my fingers. Her small fists balled tighter in the lapels of my coat. "Can't leave. You promised." The sound of shuffling feet made me look over and see guards finally reaching us as a figure in shimmering silver robes appeared at the palace door, watching intently, but keeping her distance. "It's okay," I whispered to Kyra once she had calmed down enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I'm here now." Her sobs slowed into hiccups as her body trembled against mine. Even if my contract was over and I was walking away from everything, the little girl still needed me in this moment. My gaze darted past her towards Queen Seraphine's form, silhouetted by the sunlit doorway behind her. Her eyes were wet with unshed tears, and a look that made my chest ache. "I can't stay," I said to Kyra when she looked up at me, sniffing and wiping under her nose on the back of one hand. "I have other places to go." "No," she whispered again, more softly this time but no less desperately than before. She leaned forward to bury her face into my chest once more, pressing against me so tightly that I could feel a lump in her throat. "I'm sorry," I murmured down at the top of her head, as I held her back up gently and looked past her again towards the queen, who still stood unmoving by the palace entrance. The cool professional demeanor she had worn earlier today was cracking into something else now, an expression that said more with its absence than words ever could. "I need you," Kyra told me quietly, but with authority, looking down at her feet, and then back up to meet my eyes again once more, as though daring me not to listen. "We have the 3 suns watch still. We haven't watched them rise since you were here every night." I sighed deeply, closing my eyes for a brief moment before focusing on Kyra's tear-streaked face. She was right. There had been too many promises left unfinished between us. "Kyra," I said softly, but sternly, again as gently prying her arms off me to look down at the little girl who stood with her lower lip quivering in front of my knees. I understand you're upset. I'm going to miss seeing you every day, just like how much this place means to me." Her eyes widened slightly before she nodded solemnly and took a step back from me, letting go completely. She looked up at the guards closing around us, but then turned back towards the palace. "Will you stay for one more sunrise?" Kyra asked in her most pleading voice, with tears shimmering on black lashes that were wet and smudged by recent sobs, as if it had already been a day's work getting this far. Her expression was open and honest, devoid of any pretense or political intrigue. The guards looked at each other questioningly. I could feel them weighing their orders against the reality in front of us. Kyra's tear-streaked face, my conflicted gaze, Queen Seraphine watching from afar, her form still unmoving despite a palpable sense that she too was grappling with her emotions. My response stalled as all eyes turned to me for an answer. Behind Kyra's shoulders, Finn held Kyra as she sobs broke his heart, her small body trembling in his arms despite his efforts to comfort her. The guards arrived, but did not interfere, standing at a respectful distance while watching the scene unfold with somber expressions. Queen Seraphine walked down the steps of the palace, moving slowly and deliberately, each step measured, royal, control. But Finn had spent 18 months observing her every gesture and expression. He saw through her composure now, wet eyes reflecting inner turmoil, hands clenched to hide their trembling. She stopped before them, her voice carefully neutral as she spoke. "Kyra," Seraphine began with a forced calmness that belied the distress behind it, "you cannot force Dr. Drake to stay. He has fulfilled his contract. He has a life to return to." Kyra looked up at her mother, eyes filled with an innocence and logic that cut through any pretense of formality or diplomatic niceties. "But he loves us," Kyra said in a voice barely above a whisper, but clear enough to shatter the air around them. "I know he does. He looked at you the way Papa used to look at you before he went to the stars." Silence settled over everyone present, thick and oppressive. Queen Seraphine's composure shattered for just one moment as her eyes met Finn's, everything unspoken between them suddenly visible in a single glance. 18 months of late-night conversations, accidental touches that lingered longer than necessary, looks exchanged across rooms or down corridors. Finn felt the tension crackle around him. He could almost hear his own heart pounding against Kyra's tiny chest, where it rested within her grasp. "Kyra," Seraphine whispered softly, trying to regain control of both herself and the situation. "You should not say," but Kyra cut her off, unyielding in her determination or truth telling. "And you look at him the same way." "I am 7, not stupid." She looked between them with eyes that held a wisdom beyond years. "Why are adults so dumb? You love each other." To say it, Finn was frozen no longer by Kyra's sudden declaration, but by Seraphine's expression, which mirrored his own shock mixed with a deep-seated longing. And beneath both of those emotions lay an undeniable truth that had long been unspoken. The Queen stood still as Finn found the courage to speak first, his voice quiet yet steady when he said, "She is not wrong." Seraphine's eyes glistened now more than ever before, her breath catching in her throat at his admission. She looked back at him with a mixture of gratitude and heartache evident on her face. "No," Seraphine's voice broke into an almost unrecognizable whisper. "No, she is not." Kyra let go of Finn to stand between them, grabbing both their hands tightly together and pressing them firmly against each other's palms until they intertwined. With a decisive nod towards her parents, her mother still looking utterly shattered by the realization, they all stood there in an almost painful silence. In that moment, every wall built around their carefully constructed facade crumbled under Kyra's childlike honesty. The guards pretended to be invisible, while Lord Vex, observing from his balcony high above, looked livid enough to ignite a firestorm, if it weren't for the presence of royalty grounding him into submission momentarily. Finn felt Seraphine's hand squeeze his gently as he turned back towards her, their eyes meeting once more. There was no need for words anymore. Everything they needed to say had been conveyed through this one simple action, a gesture that spoke volumes about what 18 months of professional boundaries couldn't quite hide completely until now. The weight of all those unspoken moments hung heavy between them as Finn took a deep breath and looked down at the small child who was holding their hands together tightly. He knew there would be consequences later, but for right then, it felt like they had finally found a way to begin healing what 18 months of silent longing could not address alone. "Kyra," he said softly, his voice laced with emotion as much as reason now that the dam had broken wide open before them. "We need to talk about this when we're all calm." She nodded solemnly, but held tight onto their joined hands anyway, looking up at him expectantly, while her mother watched on silently from where she still stood by the palace steps, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and worry that Finn could only hope would fade with time. Until then, Seraphine finally spoke again after several long moments had passed. "We'll see what comes next." With those words hanging in the air like an unspoken promise, They began to step back towards each other, bound by more than just duty or profession, no, but something far deeper and infinitely more complicated, that neither of Queen Seraphine's private chambers were a stark contrast to the opulence of her throne room, filled instead with an intimate collection of personal trinkets and family heirlooms. Finn stood before her in a rare moment alone, each second stretching out like silk between them, thick with unspoken words and missed opportunities. She spoke first. 18 months. He nodded solemnly. 18 months. Seraphine's eyes shimmered as she continued, her voice trembling slightly from years of holding back. I watched you save my daughter. I watched you hold her through fevers. I watched you make her laugh when nothing else could. Her voice cracked on the last sentence, revealing the depths of emotion that had long been concealed. He stepped closer, and I told myself the same things. Every night when you brought me tea, every time you fell asleep in the chair beside Kyra's bed, every morning when you smiled at me like I was something precious. Seraphine looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of deceit or mockery, but finding only honesty and warmth that mirrored her own feelings. Why did you not say anything? She asked softly. He laughed weakly. Why did you not? She had no answer, knowing too well the reasons. They both kept silent. The rigid rules of court etiquette, the fear of tarnishing a professional relationship by crossing boundaries into something more personal and intimate. They were both protecting their hearts, hiding behind walls that neither knew how to breach until this moment. He took her hands. Your daughter called us stupid. She laughed through tears. She was correct. He pulled her closer. I love you. I have loved you since the third night when you cried on my shoulder because you thought Kyra would not survive. Seraphine touched his face, tracing over the contours of his jawline with a tenderness that belied centuries of royal restraint. I love you, she whispered back, her voice barely audible, but filled with an intensity and sincerity that shook him to his core. I have loved you since the fourth night when you cried with me and promised me she would live. They kissed in a moment of unbridled passion born from 18 months of pent-up longing. Every denied feeling poured into this single act, a kiss so powerful it seemed to reshape everything around them. When they separated, she whispered, stay. Her eyes pleaded with him in a way no words could ever hope to capture fully. He smiled tenderly at her and said softly but firmly, Kyra already made that decision for me. She laughed again, this time with the breath of joy flooding through every pore. It was clear from his expression that he felt similarly about their young daughter's intervention. She is going to be insufferable about this, she noted dryly yet affectionately, her mood lifting as they embraced once more amidst a new understanding and acceptance between them. Outside in the hallway, Kyra pumped her fist victoriously upon hearing her father's return decided. Her attendant pretended not to see, but could barely hold back his own smile at witnessing such an emotional reunion that had been years overdue yet felt like forever in making. The moment Finn turned away, his steps resounding against the stone of Valoria's palace gates, a commotion erupted inside its grand halls. Lord Vex, known for his sharp tongue and sharper wit, strode confidently into the throne room where Queen Seraphine was addressing her courtiers. My dear Queen, he began with an air of condescension, I must address this recent turn of events regarding Dr. Finn Drake. Seraphine's gaze sharpened as she turned to face him, maintaining a facade of royal composure despite the turmoil within. Lord Vex, she said coolly, what is your concern? Vex smirked and took his place at the council table, crossing one leg over the other in an exaggerated display of ease. Contract doctor cannot simply become royal consort, he declared loudly enough for all to hear. There are traditions, protocols. He has not proven himself worthy. Before Finn could respond, or even realize he was being addressed, Kyra darted forward, her small frame nearly colliding with the adults around her as she approached Lord Vex. He saved my life, Kyra stated firmly, her voice carrying over the room despite its volume. He made Mother happy again. Seraphine's heart ached at the sight of her daughter standing up for Finn so boldly and truthfully. The court held their breaths, anticipating either confrontation or resolution from this unexpected outburst. He stayed when everyone else wanted to leave, Kyra continued passionately, pointing an accusatory finger towards Lord Vex. What have you done except talk? The room filled with stifled laughter as the absurdity of a child calling out such seasoned nobles hit them all at once. Vex's face flushed red in humiliation and anger. A child cannot speak to, he began defensively, only to be cut off by Seraphine herself, stepping forward from her place behind the throne. The princess has spoken, she declared firmly, but with an underlying tone of affection for Kyra's bravery. And she speaks truth. She straightened fully now, a regal figure standing tall and proud amidst her courtiers, eyes meeting Finn's across the room, where he stood stunned into silence by this turn of events. Dr. Finn Drake spent 3 months saving my daughter when our own physicians had given up, Seraphine continued with conviction, her voice clear for all to hear. He held her through fevers, stayed awake for nights on end. She paused meaningfully before adding softly yet resolutely, he did not do this for reward or position. Finn felt his heart swell as he met the Queen's gaze across the room. She looked at him now with open love, a raw and genuine affection that made everything else seem irrelevant. That is worth more than any tradition or protocol, Seraphine concluded firmly. She extended her hand to Finn then, an invitation both clear and powerful. Will you stay? Not as staff, as family. His heart pounded in his chest as he took a hesitant step forward before reaching out slowly towards the offered palm. When their hands met, they felt like electric currents running between them, a moment of pure connection forged from 18 months of longing held at bay. I made a promise about watching the 3 suns rise, Finn said softly yet with determination, looking down at Kyra, who was bouncing on her feet in excitement and anticipation. And I have 18 months of feelings I never got to express. He kissed Seraphine's hand reverently then, his lips lingering slightly longer than necessary, as he murmured, I will stay, committing himself fully once more to this alien world that had become home. Kyra cheered loudly at her father's declaration, breaking into a wide grin. See, I fixed them, she told everyone proudly afterwards. Adults are dumb about feelings. You have to just tell them. The court erupted in applause as Vex retreated in defeat, visibly seething but unable to contest the Queen's statement, which had won both Finn and her daughter significant support among their peers. In the days that followed, plans for a hybrid wedding ceremony combining human traditions with Valorian customs were laid out meticulously. A year later, on what would have been Finn's last day leaving Valoria, according to his original contract, they stood united, Seraphine in silvery white, adorned in both human and alien jewelry, Finn in traditional garb adapted for their union, and Kyra as the flower girl bouncing between them, claiming credit at every turn. Finn held her close after their vows had been exchanged, his daughter now, his wife forever, and looked out over a kingdom that once seemed foreign, but was now home. 3 steps from the gate, a child's voice called his name. He never made it through those doors, because fate and love intervened in ways